Is Rick Barnes wrong for not wanting to play Memphis? I don't think there's much of an argument. I think yes.
Yes. So for people asking about why we're talking about this, Rick Barnes said at the Big Orange Caravan he doesn't think they're going to renew the rivalry going forward. For those who don't remember, after their first year they played, Penny Hardaway threw a bunch of really stupid shots at Rick Barnes and Tennessee and got a lot of things just wrong about what happened when players were jawing at the end of the game. He really sounded like a high school coach who was his first year in college basketball, which he was at the time. And Penny, to his credit, came back the next year. Memphis beat Tennessee, and he said, "Look, I cringe at what I said last year. I shouldn't have said these things. They seem to have worked it out." And then the year after, there was the vaccine issue where Memphis players had a COVID outbreak, even though Penny had said that the players were vaccinated and ready to play. They were going to play in Nashville, had to cancel the day of. And then Penny tried to go Rick Barnes like, oh, he should reschedule the game. And Rick Barnes like, I can't reschedule the game. We have the SEC basketball schedule coming. So that everything just like fell into the crater after that. I still think this is a mistake on Tennessee's end for this reason. On the court, now it actually helps Memphis more than Tennessee. Tennessee's a better basketball program than Memphis. Just like on the field in football, it helps Memphis more than Tennessee to play Tennessee. But in recruiting, it helps Tennessee more. And I just want to point this out. Memphis, back historically, one of the agreements was Tennessee always wanted to play them in basketball. Memphis always wanted to play them in football. And they struck an agreement where Tennessee was like, we'll do this. We'll reach this compromise. And Memphis will be the only non-major program that will actually go play on the road sometimes. And the idea was there would be some Tennessee fans that showed up, but on top of that, they could recruit the city. I think that's the big rub on why this series should come back is you forget that Rick Barnes in Tennessee, you can pickpocket some players out of Memphis. And in basketball, that's a huge deal. That's why Calipari and Pastor hated playing the series to begin with.
Well, it's so one-sided is why I 100% agree with you. It's not as if there are a bunch of NBA talent level guys that are coming out of Knoxville, but there are in Memphis. I mean, that happens. And it opens up a whole other area of the country if you want to start to get into other states that surround Memphis. But Memphis would be the goal. And Tennessee is in a position now where they're really good. And Memphis can't leverage them into a football game to play basketball. That used to be a thing back in the 90s, Caleb. I'm not sure if you knew that, but Memphis used to say, play us in football and we'll play in basketball. And there was kind of the give and take there. Well, my bottom line is they should be playing Memphis in both sports, grow that into a rivalry, because I would rather see the non-conference revenue games go to in-state schools than UTEP. That's just me. So include Memphis in that. And I'm a big proponent for a lot of different reasons. It helps Tennessee in recruiting, a lot in basketball, a little in football. Those guys aren't nearly as loyal as you know in that area in football. And there's no downside except having to tolerate Penny Hardaway's smart mouth. And that to me is not reason enough to turn away a very fertile, very, very fertile recruiting ground in basketball. The show represented by Banks and Jones. Get Caleb's thoughts on that in 60 seconds. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Now, I'll ask you, is it petty or pertinent what Rick Barnes' stance is? Is it petty over the fact that he doesn't get along with Penny Hardaway and he shouldn't play that? Or is it pertinent? Does he have a point and he shouldn't play them because he doesn't have to?
I think he has a point because of how, like, Rick Barnes doesn't like this type of drama, so he doesn't like to be dragged into it. And so I think it got worse with the final round. And Rick Barnes was like, I just don't want to deal with this every year. You know, Rick Barnes just doesn't like to deal with that type of stuff. But I think I don't think it's petty. I just think it's short-sighted. And I'll give you you guys an example. The reason Tennessee didn't want to play Memphis in football is because they didn't want what happened in 1996 to happen, right? They didn't want that one random year where they get upset by Memphis, which you probably covered. No, well, I don't know if you were covering that game, but you remember it, I'm sure. Right, Dave?
Yes, I wasn't covering it in person, but it was a huge, monstrous deal. Maybe the biggest deal in Tennessee athletics, other than a championship that ever occurred, if you want to eliminate football from that conversation.
Yeah, Memphis fans never stopped talking about that game. It's like there's billboards to this day about that. They'll say we beat Peyton Manning. I mean, I'm dead serious. That's what they say. So, but here's what was lost in that shuffle, Dave. Yes, Tennessee lost to Memphis that day. That was 96. The 97 recruiting class comes around. Cedric Wilson and Andre Lott commit to Tennessee straight out of Memphis.
Yep.
And yeah, and so right out of Orange Mound. Tennessee had an Orange Mound pipeline during this time of players. They now have a pretty good Briarcrest pipeline with people like Amari Thomas and where Jabari Small was before that.
Well, you said pipeline. Orange Mound. What's Orange Mound? I don't know what that is.
That's a neighborhood in Memphis. That's where Melrose was.
Okay.
Yeah. So the neighborhood that neighborhood is in the middle of Memphis, and the whole neighborhood shuts down to go watch Melrose football.
But why is it Orange Mound? Do they support Tennessee in that area, or
no? That's just the name of the neighborhood. It's an old neighborhood. It was built in the 1800s. It was the first all black built neighborhood in Tennessee. So, yeah, there's a very strong cultural tie there. And Philip Fulmer, you talked about this. This was his brilliance in recruiting. He wasn't scared to go into those areas and go straight into the heart of them to recruit. And he was one of the first coaches willing to do that, quite honestly. And he built, and as a matter of fact, Fulmer went into Orange Mound when the Memphis football coaches wouldn't go into Orange Mound. And the U of M is right next to Orange Mound. And the Memphis football coaches wouldn't go. And Fulmer would go. And Tennessee had a pipeline of Melrose kids going to Tennessee. Cedric Wilson, Andre Lott, and Mondre Dickerson all came from Melrose. And I think that is something that Tennessee is missing out on when they don't play Memphis in both sports.
I agree. Not a lot of football prospects because their allegiances can be elsewhere, but a good amount. I mean, I think 3-4 a year is reasonable.
I agree. And typically when they're at their best, they at least have one important player from the area, right? And so, you're talking, I mean, Cedric Wilson was a key part of the 98 team. And here's the other part that's missed. When they do that, they don't just draw relevance to Memphis in general, but they actually have an impact on West Tennessee as a whole. It kind of affects them recruiting Jackson to a level 2. By the way, Al Wilson's from Jackson, obviously. And so because Tennessee is so separated regionally, you want to go across the state to play games because you can recruit not just Memphis, but North Mississippi, Eastern Arkansas. There's talent in that area too that you can pluck out.
Yep. I'm with you. I think it's short-sighted and I think it's petty. I understand Rick Barnes wants to be above that, and I respect that. But I think you need to make a phone call. I mean, how many times can you make a phone call and work things out between two rational adults? Now, maybe he doesn't think Penny Hardaway's rational and would accept any sort of thing like that. But it just, as smart as he is, it just surprises me that he hasn't figured out a way to work this out, or that he doesn't think it's that important.
That I agree. It's blown my mind too. And also because of, Dave, you remember the 2008 basketball game, Tennessee and Memphis, where the world of college basketball descended onto the state. Are we to pretend that didn't have an impact on elevating Tennessee basketball to a huge level? Oh,
no, I was maybe the biggest regular season game in non-football Tennessee sports history.
It was. The whole college basketball universe was in Tennessee for that. And I just think that, what if this happens? Do you think Josh Heupel could see what we talked about with football about building a pipeline and maybe undercut Rick Barnes and start a football series? Or does Josh Heupel think, I've already kind of got a pipeline into Memphis, I don't really need to do that?
I don't think you want in a perfect world. I don't think Josh Heupel would want to play Memphis, because then Memphis gets a little bit of exposure in East Tennessee. Now, I think it should be a rivalry in all sports, but I don't think he would necessarily see it like that.
You're right. And actually, because there is actually good football talent in East Tennessee, you don't want Memphis coming to Knoxville to get Knoxville kids. That's kind of a thing. You're right. That's a good point.